A powerful endorsement in a tight runoff and a potential turning point in Texas's biggest Republican race.
We need to send a message, not just about Texas, but about the whole country.
We're not giving up the fight.
We break down the timing and the potential political impact in a race that's getting nationwide attention.
I think this is one time where government actually got with it and got the job done.
A new state law leads to warning sirens in one of the state's most vulnerable areas, what lawmakers required after the deadly floods and how it could save lives. And a student detained by ICE weeks before graduation now ordered released. We examine the case that's raising questions about enforcement and due process.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Daniel Marin in for Josh Hinkle. Friday was the final day of early voting in the Texas primary runoffs, with Election Day on Tuesday. And headlining the election, the most expensive Senate primary in U.S. history between four-term incumbent John Cornyn and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. After months of speculation, Paxton earned the endorsement of President Donald Trump on Tuesday morning. However, this race is far from over. State Capitol reporter Adam Schwager looks at what early voting turnout might tell us about this Tuesday's outcome.
For our next United States Senator, Ken Paxton.
The Attorney General dancing through the week. On Tuesday, he received the most consequential endorsement of his life from
the 45th and 47th President of these United States, Donald J. Trump.
His supporters also feeling the good vibe.
He'll be above 50% on Election Day, no doubt about it.
While those backing his opponent, John Cornyn,
weathering the storm,
a silver lining, nothing is finalized until Tuesday night.
Runoffs are really weird. It's really hard to tell who's just going to turn out, especially in Texas. The runoff is the day after Memorial Day.
Using the limited data we have, we can see how many people have shown up so far. 560,000 early votes cast in this 1 week early voting window. When it's all said and done, pollster Mark Jones says,
I think we're looking at Republican turnout somewhere in the 1 million to 1.25 million range, potentially up to 1.5 million if there's a big Election Day push.
That's significantly fewer Republican votes than the 2.1 million cast in March.
Generally, the lower turnout is, the better that is for candidates like, say, Ken Paxton. The people who turn out to vote in these primaries tend to be the more conservative Republicans.
Trying to avoid this fate, Cornyn is encouraging people to get to the polls, calling on people who didn't even cast a ballot in March.
Here's the good news. You can still vote in this runoff. So cast your ballot.
Paxton making the same last-second push.
So your vote, not just your vote, but I'm asking you to tell your friends, tell your family, make them go.
Because you never know.
Is this race over because of the president's endorsement?
Cornyn's a pretty substantial underdog, and it would take a minor miracle for him to win on Tuesday.
Until the polls close.
Not impossible, but relatively unlikely.
For State of Texas, I'm Adam Schwager.
When President Trump endorses a candidate in Texas, that person usually wins, but not always. Back in March, the president endorsed Sid Miller in the Republican race for Texas Agriculture Commissioner. Miller lost that race to Nate Sheets. And then in January, Trump endorsed Lee Wambsgans in a special election in North Texas for a state Senate seat. Democrat Taylor Remmett won that race. The president continues to have strong support from Republicans in Texas. April polling from the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas found 77% of Republicans had a favorable view of Trump. That number has been declining, though. His favorability among the GOP peaked at 93% in December of 2024, just weeks after his re-election. As we mentioned, this is one of the most expensive primary elections in the history of our country. But while most of the spending is happening in Texas, a lot of the campaign money is coming from outside of the states. Gabby Birenbaum has been looking closer at campaign spending in a series of reports for the Texas Tribune. Thank you so much for joining us, Gabby. So what stands out the most about who is funding the Cornyn-Paxton race, and why should this matter to voters?
Yeah, I mean, this is a race that's been just crazy expensive, just set the record for most expensive runoff in U.S. history. It already set the record combined with the Democrats for most expensive primary. In the runoff, it's been, not just the campaigns, but these massive super PACs, right, that have come in for both Cornyn and for Paxton. influenced by a handful of mega donors, A, and then B, dark money groups who are giving millions of dollars that are essentially untraceable to know exactly who's funding some of these efforts. But we do know some of the, high name donors for both, as well as some people who've just given to the individual campaigns, including some notable politicians, right? Like former President Bush gave about $5,000 to Senator Cornyn for his reelect. So there's a lot to dig into there on the campaign finance.
Gabby, you mentioned dark money. How big a role is dark money playing, and how does that affect understanding who exactly is influencing these races?
Yeah, it plays a huge role. A lot of times, so dark money, to sort of break it down, is a 501c4 group. That's the sort of name under the tax code. And those groups basically don't have to disclose who their donors are. And so a lot of times what will happen is you'll see a PAC, a political action committee, spend in a campaign. They have to disclose their donors, but that PAC will be funded entirely by dark money or by a separate PAC that's then funded by dark money. So these groups sort of funnel their money through these complex channels and then are able to spend hundreds of thousands or millions on the race. And so sometimes that's, as I mentioned, through PACs. Sometimes it's just straight up. So for example, during the primary, the Lone Star Freedom Project, which we know is run by former Governor Rick Perry, they kicked in, $17 million to support Senator Cornyn in ads, but they don't have to disclose exactly who their donors are.
I see. And looking at your reporting, you also found that outside groups are driving ad spending in several congressional races in Texas. How is that outside money shaping the campaigns compared to previous election cycles?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So we have a bunch of runoffs, not unsurprising, right? Because of redistricting and retirements, there's a bunch of open seats. And the vast majority of money is coming from outside groups. And that's a real change from even a few cycles ago when it would be, about a split between how much candidates are spending versus outside groups. It's now been almost entirely outside groups on the airwaves. Some of the big spenders you've seen is crypto has spent in a few races. AI groups have spent in quite a number of races, and that's both an AI group associated with OpenAI that prefers, more, little regulation, and then Anthropic, which supports a more robust regulation regime. So both of those PACs, right, are playing in these various Texas primaries. You've got groups like the Club for Growth or the Blue Dogs. Club for Growth is a conservative group that, plays in Republican primaries a lot. Blue Dogs is a moderate centrist Democratic group. So you've got some of those more traditional political groups, as well as these corporate interests that are dumping millions into these Texas House runoffs.
So what are these PACs trying to accomplish with their spending? What do they get for their money?
Yeah, a lot of it. So PACs can't coordinate with the campaigns. So a lot of it, I think the New York Times described this as winks and nods. You'll see, on a congressional candidate's website, I support innovation, right, in finance. And that's sort of a wink at the crypto industry that you can spend money in my race, right? Or I support, a deregulated AI landscape that lets us compete with China, right? That's sort of a wink towards OpenAI. And so a lot of times especially with open races, when you're getting a new member in a safe seat, for these big corporate PACs, that's an opportunity, right, to sort of influence these members before they become members and sort of mark them as being on the team of having the preferred policy outcome they want in their sort of niche area of interest.
So what should voters take away about the influence of money in these runoffs in particular?
I think it just goes to show, right? I mean, there are massive, massive interests, donors, and dark money groups that are trying to shape these elections that have a preferred outcome, and are spending millions. I mean, in the case of the Senate race, there's been over 130 million spent, right, to try to influence the outcome. And so I think your vote is more important than ever and more valuable than ever. And so it's important to both know who's behind some of these efforts, but then also know just the power of your vote and how deeply these groups are courting it.
All right, Gabby Birenbaum, Washington correspondent for the Texas Tribune. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Lives lost, lessons learned. After deadly storms, Kerr County now has flood sirens in place. The policy changes driving the rollout. After weeks of uncertainty, an Austin high school senior detained by ICE is now ordered released. We look at what changed and what comes next. And what is a 765 kilovolt transmission line? And why are companies planning to build them across Texas? We break down the project and the pushback. Less than a year after more than 130 people died during the July 4th floods, new outdoor weather warning systems are being installed. After the tragedy, state lawmakers pushed for stronger warning systems in flood-prone areas. As Matt Grant shows us, the first sirens are in place in Kerr County, part of a broader effort to give Texans more time to get out of harm's way.
Sirens have just been installed along the Guadalupe River, a priority for lawmakers to have them in place before the start of camp season. In an area that's seen tragedy, new systems are now in place to prevent another. In Kirk County, 6 outdoor warning sirens are now installed and functional, each with a 2-mile diameter, represented in circles on this map released by the Upper Guadalupe River Authority.
Our goal as a board is to return a feeling of preparedness and safety to the Upper Guadalupe River.
The UGRA, which faced lawmaker criticism for not having sirens, says over the next year it will install more, along with new river gauges, but admits it may not be possible to install sirens in all locations prone to flooding.
If we were to put in all of the sirens that were shown on the map, it would be in the neighborhood of 130 sirens. And we do not think that is reasonable.
Officials say the sirens will be at least 50 feet tall. They'll broadcast alert tones and voice messages, run on 2 forms of power, and will be controlled locally and remotely from 2 base stations in Kerrville. River Authority officials say it will work to educate the public about the meaning of different sounds and tones, and will have a River Hub website where people can view real-time data.
I think this is one time where government actually got with it and got the job done.
Republican State Senator Paul Betancourt was among the first to call for warning sirens days after the July 4th flooding. In the aftermath, Governor Abbott signed SB 3, requiring 30 flood-prone counties to install and maintain sirens, with each eligible for more than $1 million in grant money. Kirk County is now the first.
The key thing is you don't have to evacuate the county. You just have to get to higher ground and get away from the water surge. So I think it's really important.
The UGRA would not say where those 6 sirens are located, only telling us that they're on private property. We filed several public records requests to find out more information. An additional 2 are expected to go up by June 1st, but locations for those have not yet been finalized. In Hunt, Matt Grant, State of Texas.
And according to Senator Betancourt's office, the River Authority used reserve funds to pay for the siren project. It will be reimbursed by the Texas Water Development Board. State lawmakers approved $50 million to deploy sirens, sensors, and other flood safety measures in the area of the state known as Flash Flood Alley.
For $30 to $40 billion, we ought to know what we're doing.
A multi-billion-dollar power line project faces pushback from Texas lawmakers, why they say the plan needs a second look. And detained weeks before graduation and now ordered released. We break down the ruling that sent a student home from ICE custody and what it means moving forward. An Austin high school senior reunited with his family on Wednesday after weeks in federal immigration custody. Earlier this month, we told you the story of Luis Fernando Cabrera. The 18-year-old landed in an immigration detention after a DPS trooper stopped him over an expired registration. After nearly 3 weeks in custody, a federal judge ordered the U.S. government to release him. Investigative reporter Kelly Wiley has followed the story for weeks now. She's joining us now, so walk us through these new developments.
Well, Cabrera had been detained at the Karnes County Immigration Processing Center southeast of San Antonio. And originally, ICE officials told us he would remain there until he completed his immigration proceedings. But Wednesday, U.S. District Court Judge Jason Pulliam granted his legal team's habeas corpus petition and found that Cabrera's detention was unlawful because the teen was not a flight risk or a danger to the community. He did not have a criminal record, and he previously complied with the conditions of his release. In a statement, the Department of Homeland Security said Cabrera will receive full due process. The DHS spokesperson went on to say they encourage every person here illegally to take advantage of this offer and reserve the chance to come back to the U.S. the right legal way to live the American dream. If not, you will be arrested and deported without a chance to return. And part of this order from the judge states that Cabrera could not be deported or removed under this detention. He also stated that he expedited this case because of Cabrera's approaching high school graduation. That's coming up in just over a week.
All right, Kelly, will help us with some of the backgrounds in this case. How long has Cabrera been in the country, and is he here legally?
So Cabrera came in as a family unit to the country. That's according to an ICE spokesperson in 2019. So at the time, he was 11 years old. And we know that he's got several family members here. He's living right now with his sister and his little baby nephew, who's just 2 years old. And what we understand from court records is that since 2020, Cabrera has had an open case with the government. And his attorney tells us that he's been complying with his asylum proceedings. They came came here seeking asylum, and their attorney says, and this was kind of part of the judge's order, that he had been complying with that process so far. My colleague Esme Zamora and I spoke to his sister on the phone Thursday morning after she sent this video of their reunion to us. The big thing his family and legal team were pushing for, again, was to see him be released in time for graduation.
What do you think this case tells us about how immigration enforcement is playing out in Texas right now, particularly for people who came to this country as children?
I think there's a lot to learn from this case in particular. One thing that jumped out to us about this was that the trooper that arrested Luis Fernando was a trooper that was trained under what's called a 287G agreement. And so there's lots of different forms of these agreements. They're very common in Texas right now. We're the state that has the most 287G agreements. And this is essentially an agreement between a law enforcement agency and ICE that we will, for instance, the task force model of this agreement that allows for trained officers to be able to identify and arrest people suspected of being in the country unlawfully. There's also a jail task force model that would allow for jails to hold people thought to be in the country unlawfully for ICE to come and then detain them themselves. So that was really significant to us, that this arrest was a product by some measure of these agreements. DPS has had a 287G agreement with the federal government since October 2025. So that was significant. But yes, also, I'm an education reporter. That's what I investigate in that office all the time. And so it was interesting to see a kid, someone that age, 18, someone so close to graduation, someone coming home from a late night shift at a fast food restaurant to be detained. And I think we go back to what we originally heard from the president about this mission that they're on to crack down on people who are undocumented in the country. And what we heard then was that they were going after the worst of the worst.
Yeah, violent offenders.
Exactly. And so it's interesting in this case, the rallying that we heard, right? Letters from his English teacher, letters from his principals, talking to his soccer coach, the folks at his church saying, this is a kid with impeccable character. And so I thought that was interesting as well.
All right, graduation day on June 2nd. Investigative reporter Kelly Wiley, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Texans push back on a plan to build huge power lines through their communities. Now they're getting support from lawmakers. The concerns, they say, still need to be answered. For months, people in communities around the state have been fighting to stop a project to move electricity across Texas via giant transmission lines. Now some state lawmakers are joining that fight. While citizens have voiced concerns about the impact on their communities, some lawmakers say the power line project won't exactly do what they wanted it to do. Eric Hendrickson is following the pushback.
3 transmission lines planned to carry power across the state.
This is a misguided project. And for $30 to $40 billion, we ought to know what we're doing. And it really appears like we were taking the step in the wrong direction for Texas.
Representative Brad Buckley from Bell County is leading the charge, drafting a letter coming out against the project to build 765 kilovolt transmission lines.
We have a behemoth power line project that was not led by increased natural gas fueled electricity generation.
The letter, signed by 25 state legislators, argues the project exceeds the intended scope of the bill that authorized it, drafted in the wake of the 2021 winter storm.
From the testimony, the reason that we were 4 minutes from basically a blackout for 90% of Texas that could have kept the lights off for 6 weeks was the fact that we didn't have these go-to energy sources.
In 2023, the Texas legislature ordered the development of a reliability plan for the Permian Basin region in West Texas. As part of that approved plan, the Public Utility Commission of Texas approved new 765 kilovolt transmission lines. This map, published by ERCOT, shows the 3 lines.
One route that we would like them to not choose is that route which will border a big percentage of the state park.
State Representative Helen Kerwin says that line runs along Dinosaur Valley State Park. Another line passes through Burnett County, with one proposed segment going through Tracy King's backyard.
We're just hoping that, that this will end soon, and hopefully they'll choose another route or dissolve the project completely.
Representative Buckley is calling for energy generation closer to where it's needed and argues in the letter that not all the power line routes are even necessary, including the route passing through Tracy's backyard. It wouldn't be energized for nearly a decade.
We are super excited to hear that so many state representatives are listening.
Representative Buckley says the intent of the bill was to ensure reliability across the state.
If we can adequately move power around the Permian Basin and locally generate there, we will be further towards solving our issues for the future than this behemoth project that really defies a lot of logic.
Eric Hendrickson, State of Texas.
ERCOT says these lines are needed to handle rapid growth and prevent future shortages. Eric reached out for comments from both Encore and the Lower Colorado River Authority, which are leading parts of the project. The LCRA told us that they continue to follow the direction of the legislature, the PUC, and ERCOT regarding these projects. Encore told us it, quote, appreciates the thoughtful input of state and local leaders, and it says it will work together to meet growing power needs across Texas. Thanks again for joining us for State of Texas. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.